What if everything we know about habits is wrong? Because what we're calling habits aren't really habits. And how many times can I say habits in one sentence? Find out in this episode. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Behavioral sciences for the past 14 years. He pioneered the integration of behavioral science into the corporate sphere by establishing the first Fortune 100 behavioral science unit at Walmart. His latest venture, and he's had a couple of entrepreneurial ventures, his most recent one, Persona, is dedicated to identifying and recruiting top remote talent through innovative software and behavioral science-based techniques. He recently wrote the book Real Change, Moving Beyond Habits to Achieving Lasting Transformation. So, Jason, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right into habit, right? The term habit. Let's talk about that. How is that term being misused?
Yeah, I think the term habit is often misused. I think that we tend to label any repeated behavior as a habit, but really, true habits are automatic reflexive actions that are supposed to require little or no conscious thought. So my entire argument is for some time has been that many activities that we call habits are actually do demand significant mental effort and willpower, and we should really call these things routines or practices. And it's very important to get the distinction between habits, small, non-conscious, automatic behaviors, and then routines or practices, which are just behaviors that do require thought, mental effort, focus. I think it's just important to draw a distinction there so that we can call those things something different, because psychologically they are very different.
So an example would be like physical activity, right? You have someone who's a runner, and so they generally run at the same time every day, every week. But if they find themselves on vacation, then it might not be in their routine, but it's still something that they're going to actively seek out. But that's all requiring a significant amount of effort, as opposed to like brushing their teeth in the morning. It doesn't. They're not like making a conscious decision to do it. They're just brushing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for example, like brushing your teeth before bed, putting on your seatbelt when you enter the car, washing your hands after using the bathroom, maybe taking your shoes off when you enter your home. Like these are examples of habitual behaviors, of habits. Those are true habits, right? They're things that they're really simple, easy behaviors that you built this kind of reflex to do consistently in a certain context. Those things are habits. The science of habit formation works very well to create those types of behaviors. But unfortunately, I think when people say, I want to start new habits, they're not thinking about brushing their teeth or putting on their seatbelt. They're thinking about, I want to get into a meditation practice, or I want to start learning a new skill or learning a new language, or I want to start reading every day or develop the pattern, the habit of writing. And unfortunately, the science of habit formation doesn't really work for these larger, more complex behaviors. Those are just completely different types of behaviors. They require completely different strategies for achieving them. So I think there's a bit of a bait and switch going on in the self-help habit formation behavior design world.
So it might even be something that you would forget that you even did. You walk in the house, you take your shoes off, like you didn't even remember that you took your shoes off. You like, oh, did I remember to brush my teeth this morning? You know what? I'm not. Yeah, I think I did. Like the types of things that are so fleeting and require so little cognitive effort that you'll probably remember it, but you might even not.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a perfect way of describing what habits are.
Well, thank you. Okay, so what's an important reason for making that distinction?
I think the reason that's important to set up this distinction is because creating a habit and creating like one of these other types of behaviors requires completely different strategies, right? So, there's this thing that's been talked about for many years, like the habit loop, where it's like cue, routine, reward, cue, action, reward. Great. That sort of structure works very well for creating these small habitual behaviors. But when you're talking about doing something like how do you get somebody to run every month, or not every month, every day or every week, you're trying to get somebody to learn a new skill, if you're trying to get somebody to do something fairly complex, we really should use different strategies for doing that. We don't really want to, it's not a matter of just rewarding the person consistently for doing that behavior. It's not a matter of just triggering them or cueing them a lot. It's not a matter of making the behavior as small and simple as possible. A lot of these behaviors you can't make any smaller or simpler. So for example, running. Running is always going to be horrible. It's always going to be painful. It's always going to be a slog. It's going to require a lot of willpower.
You don't like running, do you?
I say this as somebody that used to be, I was captain of my track and cross country teams in high school. So,
Oh, wow.
but I am a recovering runner. Let's just say
Okay.
that. So these behaviors though, they're never going to be that easy. You're never going to be able to just mindlessly or, in a trance, make your way through these behaviors. They're going to require willpower. They're going to require conscious effort. They're going to require strength to grit through. And so I think, unfortunately, the strategies that you would use to make something a habit, they don't work for these behaviors. And so what I argue, and what I've argued for many years, is that the key thing, if you really want to get somebody to do meaningful, challenging behaviors, you have to pick the right behavior for them. It's not a matter of just taking a behavior like meditation or running or something like that and saying, I'm going to use these habit hacks and these tricks, and I'm going to add in some prompts or some cues. I'm going to make the behavior smaller. I'm going to add in some rewards, create a feedback loop. None of that stuff will work for things that are actually challenging and that stretch you as a human and make you grow. What I've
Okay.
argued is that it's all about just picking the right thing for the person, because these behaviors, the ones that we really care about people doing, are never going to be easy. They're never going to be automatic. They're always going to require you to push yourself to your cognitive or physical limit. And so therefore, if you're going to ask people to do that, you have to pick the right behavior for them, so that doing this behavior is something that they're capable of doing, that they enjoy, hopefully. It's something that actually accomplishes their goals and therefore rewards them by giving them forward progress in their lives, et cetera. So my belief has always been that if we actually understand this distinction between habit and what I call practices or transformative practices, like basically these non-habitizable behaviors that people think are habitizable,
Yeah.
that if we actually understand this distinction, our strategy will become less around how do I add this prompt or cue or hack this or that. It's more about how do I just pick the right thing for me or for my patient or whoever I'm working with.
Got it. So
Because
instead of like tricking ourselves into doing this thing that we don't want to do, we should be more focused on finding something that we do want to do. We're going to look forward to, like, it's going to become part of our routine and stay part of our routine because we look forward to it, because we enjoy it or find it fulfilling, or we're doing it with friends that we want to see, or,
yeah,
there's speaking to a therapist recently who said you got to find their cheese. They're a mouse in a maze and you got to find the right cheese. So that sounds like you're saying something similar.
yeah, I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. And like what I talk about whenever I'm talking about choosing a behavior, I always talk about 4 different dimensions. I talk about how exciting is the behavior. Do you find it compelling? Is it something that you really want to do? Is it something that just excites you? I talk about, is this something that you find enjoyable? Do you actually like doing the behavior? Do you actually like the activity? Does it bring you pleasure? Does it bring you some form of joy? I talk about ease. So the behavior will probably not be easy, but the question is just, is it something that, given your circumstances and your talents and your just capabilities, are you able to do it in a way where it's not just like brutally painful? Like, because if it's extremely uncomfortable or extremely inconvenient for you to do, you're not going to do it. And then the last thing I talk about, is it effective? The entire purpose of behaviors in life is for us to solve problems or to fulfill needs, right? That's the entire reason that we evolved legs, the
Do
reason that we
anything.
have
Yeah.
arms, right? The whole purpose of behaviors is to do important things in our lives. It's to solve problems, accomplish needs. So the question then becomes, okay, if I want to start running or if I want to start meditating, why am I doing this in the first place? I may not even be conscious of why I want to do the behavior, but there is some why. There's a why for every behavior. There is a problem, a scratch, an itch rather, that needs to get scratched. And so the last question always becomes, why do I want to do this thing? What am I doing this behavior for? And is the action I've chosen, is the activity I've chosen, is it actually effective at accomplishing those things? And so I think that whenever we're evaluating a behavior for ourselves or for somebody else, we should ask these 4 questions. Is this something that I or they are excited by? Is it something that I find enjoyable? Is this something I'm actually able to do given my context, given my capabilities as a person, et cetera? And then, is this something, will it actually help me effectively achieve some goal that I'm going after that's meaningful to me? And so I think that that's the entire art of behavior selection.
And it needs to be something that's not too boring or too unchallenging,
Sure.
that is not going to be stimulating enough. And it can't be, as you mentioned, it can't be too rigorous that you're not going to be able to do it. It's just going to be something you dread doing because it's too hard. So you might like running,
Yeah.
for someone who's unlike you enjoys running. But if you make the distances too hard or it's too steep or something like that, like now you're or if it's the pace is too slow, or it's too flat or too uninteresting, right? It's got to be this middle ground of stimulating enough, but not too stimulating, I guess.
No, yeah, perfectly well said. Yeah. So I think that's the entire art of behavior selection. It has
Okay.
to be done on a person by person, individual by individual basis if it's going to be done well. I think that the problem with the psychological slash behavioral sciences over the last number of decades is the field's been obsessed with finding general principles, right? Like these are persuasion principles or these are behavior change principles. And if you just apply, like use this bias or use this nudge or you apply this like technique, you're going to get this result. If you actually look at the effect sizes across most psychological interventions, they're very small. And that's just because, on average, for your average human being, these tactics are not that effective. But if you actually look at the raw data, if you ever look at the raw data of these studies, you see there's a lot of differences in between individuals. Like some tactics work very well for some individuals and have even a negative effect on others. And so it
Yeah.
nets out to being a small effect, maybe a small positive effect. But what this has kind of told me over the years is that we're all unique. We all have our own strengths, weaknesses. We all have our own personalities. We all have our own life situations, or we all have different values or different issues that we're dealing with at any given time in our lives. And all these things combine together to make us more predisposed to responding to one intervention or another.
Yeah.
And so I think that really what this tells me is that the art of behavior change really is all about understanding the person, understanding the individual, and matching them with the right program for them to get what they want. It's not a matter of just using cookie cutter tactics or techniques.
That makes so much sense. And also we had mentioned that you were at Walmart, and before the show, we had spoken briefly that someone we had recently on the show, Dr. Kyra Barbanet, she had been a consultant at Walmart, and she put out a book about behavior change where she talks about being iterative. And I think that works really well with what you're saying.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. It didn't work for me. And then people so often think, well, it's because there's something wrong with me. And what you're arguing is, no, we're all infinitely complicated and different from one another. It didn't work for you because it was just the wrong thing for you. Try again. What didn't work? Why didn't you like it? Why didn't you do it? Go back and try something different. And maybe the next thing will. It's like smoking cessation, right? Like just because hypnotherapy worked for one person doesn't mean the gum isn't going to work for you. It means, so you got to keep trying. So I think that's a really good message for our patients too.
Yeah.
Like, the big takeaways from this are you have to find the thing that's right for you for the reasons and the ways that you described, but it's complicated and it's hard, and we have to be okay with that. And if we aren't okay with that, we're going to set ourselves up for failure, and our patients are going to set themselves up for failure. And so like acknowledging that and allowing them to go into it with that perspective, I think going to be helpful. So that's fantastic advice. So something else from your book is the pyramid, right?
Yeah.
Can you describe the pyramid?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I have it right here. Show it to the camera. Well, it's in the book. It's on page 29. So the first time I saw Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I just thought it was just a beautiful image, just because I just love this hierarchical way of thinking about different motivators, needs in life. And I was thinking about, as I was thinking through, over the past, let's say 10 years, my behavior change philosophy, I was thinking about how would I visualize this? How would I represent an image? And I really thought that the pyramid would be a great way to represent it. And so what I talk about in the book is, it's my belief that behavior change really needs, you need to build a foundation in order to do proper transformation or proper behavior change in your life. And I see that the foundation of the behavior change pyramid, what I call the transformative practice path, the foundation of this pyramid really is energy optimization. So if you think about why do we do habits, or why do we build habits rather, habits are really a way for us to conserve the mental bandwidth and energy. At the end of the day, energy, right? Thinking is really energetically expensive. It requires a lot of effort. We don't like to do it. You see, like most people use heuristics, we use shortcuts, right? We use rules of thumb. We don't like to think too much. And so, thinking is very energetically expensive. We didn't evolve really in an environment of energy abundance. And so, in general, what we like to do as humans is figure out the solution to a problem and then automate it. And that's, I think, for very small behaviors, that's what we do with habits. So what we learn things like, oh, okay, when I wake up in the morning, instead of me consciously having to think, okay, reach to the side of me on the nightstand, grab the water, drink it. Instead, I'm just going to automate as many of these kind of recurring behaviors as I can, right? And so
Yeah.
I see so much of life and so much of the purpose of behaviors as like energy optimization problem. And so my whole belief is like, okay, well, if you have all of these behaviors that you put on autopilot and you're saving a lot of mental bandwidth, a lot of energy by putting all these things on autopilot, well, let's say now, today, you want to change your habits. Let's say you're not happy with all the different kind of autopilot things that you do in your life. Well, in order to get out of that energetically advantageous state, you have to up your energy game. You have to actually make sure that you have the mental bandwidth, that you have the energy in order to actually disrupt these automatic patterns, these energetically inexpensive patterns. And you actually have to now consciously and with energy and with force kind of go in, shock the system, break those old kind of automations. And then once you've actually taken the energy to do this, then you actually can go through this very rigorous, expensive process of breaking your old habits, putting new ones in their place. And then once you've done that and you've set your life up to be kind of smooth rolling, then you can actually tackle what I call transformative practices, which are these effortful, intense behaviors that you choose for you and you alone, and just go through that.
Okay. So the first thing you do is the small things, right? The
Yeah.
small things that
Yeah.
are habits that you need to change. And in order to optimize that amount of energy, I would guess one of the things that you need to tackle first is like sleep,
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
Because as you said, very cognitively expensive and energetically expensive. Well, if you're sleep depleted, then you're going to have a tough time with any of that. And your executive function isn't as effective as it could be. And so, what are you doing for sleep? And that sounds like a great thing that we can really bring to patients, right?
Yeah.
Like they've got these really big ambitions and you can really distill it down to, okay, first let's optimize your sleep. And then we can start working on other things, right? Does that sound like a reasonable strategy?
I think that's reasonable. Yeah. I mean, I realized actually that the energy component when I was in, well, I guess I can rewind a little bit. So when I was in college and I was studying neuroscience, I took a course with this guy, Robert Sapolsky. He's like a well-known neuroscientist. He wrote this book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. He's written a couple newer ones as well. One's called Behave, one's called Determined. And he's just a fantastic researcher. I love him to death. And I took a course with him rather called Mechanisms of Neuron Death, where we were looking at neurodegenerative diseases and like what
Okay.
causes them and how do they work and what's going on at the biochemical level, et cetera. And what kept coming up over and over, whether or not we were looking at Alzheimer's or any other disease, was all these diseases were at their core kind of like energetic failures, where you would have like a cluster of neurons die out just due to kind of problems with the mitochondria, or you would have maybe in certain other cells dysregulated mitochondria causing like maladaptive changes to the way that this all functions. So I just kept seeing over and over, okay, mitochondria seem to be at the core of so many of these diseases just at the cellular level. So I got very interested in just like in energy, right? In cellular energy, in oxidative respiration versus other forms of energy production. And it's something that over the years I've just found very interesting. And so that kind of put this idea in my head, okay, like energy is really important for the brain and it's really important for therefore how we behave, how we remember, how we're able to think. I knew that the brain was an energetically very expensive organ, but I just kind of like filed away just kind of this interesting insight from that course. As I kind of like went through my career, doing behavior change work for different companies, I was dealing with some of my own kind of, you could say like health inefficiencies, right? So like I had, I was never a great sleeper. But this really came to a head in my late 20s when I was having a lot of issues with insomnia and just like wasn't sleeping very well. And I just found that so many of the things I wanted to do, I just couldn't do. I just didn't have the energy for it. I was just really tired, or I was just like, oh man, I really should go to the gym. I should work out. I should do these things. But I didn't have the energy for it. I just felt kind of dead and just out of it.
Yeah.
And work was enough stress work, provided me with enough stress where just dealing with that was like a full-time job practically. And so
Yeah. Well,
what
it
I
was work,
decided,
right? It was a full-time job.
it was work. Yeah, totally. It was work. And so in my late 20s, I really like went very hard on just like trying to figure out like what's going on with my sleep and like, could I solve this? Could I actually like get it so that I'm sleeping like a full 8 hours a night through the night, sleeping really well, waking up rested. And so I did a lot there. And I would say that, by my like very late 20s / my early 30s, I solved for me. And what I noticed was that so many of my behavior change problems in my life, the things I was trying to solve for years that I just couldn't solve, just kind of overnight solve themselves, right? So
Yeah.
as soon as I fix my sleep. And I noticed I was like, wow, I have a lot more energy now. Like I'm actually willing to, I have the energy to go to the gym if I want to, instead of actually just like reaching for DoorDash or Uber Eats, I'm actually cooking more. Like I actually have this extra kind of boost in energy that's allowing me to break a lot of bad habits, do a lot of things that I should be doing. And then I noticed that just in so many different areas of my life, I was able to get out of these like behavioral ruts.
Yeah.
And so that kind of connected in my mind with kind of my earlier realizations during college. And I was like, okay, interesting. I really think that the core of so many behavior change issues is just people just not having enough energy. Like, and I mean that in the, the familiar sense of the term, but also in the biological sense of the term.
Yeah.
And so that's really what kind of gave me that insight there. And in the book, I give some examples, like from some papers, like kind of showing that this isn't me just being woo woo or kind of silly. Like this actually does have some biological meaning to it. And there's a lot of research in this area. And I do think that just working on your energy, as cheesy as it sounds, is actually
Yeah.
extremely important and lays the base of the foundation of the pyramid.
The foundation for the pyramid. And then you said, once that's sorted out and then you're going to do this other thing that's going to require a certain amount of energy, cognitive
Yeah.
energy and otherwise. And you mentioned it, habit trading.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on what that is?
So I call it habit trading, and really what it is that if you're doing any behavior in life, there's a reason for it. Like we don't just willy-nilly perform behaviors, right? Behaviors are all done by our brain sees there's a specific need or a specific problem that needs to get solved, and therefore it emits behavior in order to solve those problems. And so that's kind of my perspective. That's how I look at behavior. And because I look at behavior that way, I always ask the question, whenever anybody is doing something that they do not want to do, I always say, well, why are you doing it? What is the problem you're solving? What is the need you are fulfilling? And so for habit trading, my entire belief is, okay, let's say you have this bad snacking behavior. You're snacking on stuff that you would rather not be snacking on. You're eating compulsively and you just, just when you're at your desk, you have a bag of chips, you're just eating it over and over again. You don't want to do this anymore. Well, my entire belief is, well, your brain is having you do that for a reason. So if we're going to get you to stop that, we have to kind of like, almost like Indiana Jones style, kind of swap in a new behavior.
So what you're not doing is you're not going, why am I doing that? And then kind of trying to take a deep dive into why I'm reaching for the chips. Is it because I'm feeling this way or thinking this way? And no, you're like, we're not going to take that deep dive. We're just going to switch it out. And for anyone who hasn't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, what he's referring to is swapping a golden idol for a bag of sand so that the contraption doesn't realize that the idol is missing, and then a giant stone falls on your head. So sorry for the pop culture reference.
Yeah, I should have explained that one. But yeah, the entire idea here is, okay, so let's say you're snacking mindlessly while you're at your desk. Well, obviously, like you're doing that for a reason. Maybe the reason is that, I mean, the devil's in the details here, right? So it's hard for me to generalize about this, but let's say I'm snacking all the time on Doritos, let's say. Well, it could be that, okay, I wait too long in between eating, my blood sugar gets low, and so therefore I need to, amp it up by eating some easy to digest carbs, whatever the reason is. Let's say my body's just trying to regulate its blood sugar somehow, and it just therefore has me do this mindless behavior whenever I'm at my desk. Let's say I want to stop that. What I'd recommend is, okay, you want to break this bad habit. We have to understand, why are you doing this behavior? Well, you're doing this probably because, your body feels starved or feels like it's not getting enough nutrients or whatever it is, or maybe you're doing very stressful, demanding tasks while you're at your desk. Therefore, what is an alternative behavior that I can put in that helps you get to your goals, that is not deleterious to your health, your life, etc., that we could swap in instead, that you could basically have take the place of this bad behavior that you want to stop. My belief is that, nature abhors a vacuum. If your brain has created a habitual behavior that you're just doing mindlessly, it's doing it for a reason. So let's just substitute in a good version of that behavior that gets you to the same place, but that won't cause long-term pain, that will just put you on the right path, let's say. And so that's the whole idea behind habit trading.
Incompatible with your goals.
Yes.
So you want to do something that's compatible with your goals, not incompatible with your goals. So or rather your long-term goals.
Yeah. Great way of putting it.
Thank you. So I think that's fantastic advice. So, I mean, you've really given us a lot of different ways to think about approaching habit change, routine, lifestyle change with our patients, which is, you know, at the crux of so much of what we do. But you've worked in tech for a while as well. So I
Yep.
do want to ask you, and you might not have an answer, but I'm still going to throw it out there. The tech world, I feel like, understands human behavior in as much as they've commodified our attention. Like they know how to get us to reach for our
hmm
phones and stay on our phones. And then they're selling it. They're selling that attention in the same way that I am kind of doing the same thing because I have ads on my show, right?
Sure.
They're buying and selling our attention. So is there anything that physicians should know about human behavior that the tech world already does?
Ah, it's such a great question. So I think what the tech world's discovered is that if you take the things that people are already doing or that they want to do and you just make them small, simple, and easy, then people will do them a lot more, right? So for example, Facebook, which is like the, arguably the most successful app ever created, the most successful technology product ever created. What is it doing? Like, well, people have been gossiping about other people for forever. People have been keeping up with friends and family for forever. In the past, they wrote letters to each other, or you would, drive across the country to see one another, or you'd take a boat across the world, 100 years ago in order to see, distant relatives if you had the time. So people have always been, we're social creatures. We evolved that way. Much of our brains are devoted to tracking social relations, like trying to determine the status of individuals, trying to forge new alliances or connections with strangers, or
We're
forge
tribal
deeper
animals, we're
connections.
social animals. And so
Exactly.
as much as we don't like other people, we need other people.
Yeah, totally. So we've been doing this for forever. I mean, we're built to do this. And so what Facebook just did was they just built an application that just made it easier for us to do what we were already doing all the time.
Yeah.
They made it easier to keep in touch with hundreds or thousands of friends. They made it easier to keep in touch with family members to see how they're doing. They made it easier to show off our accomplishments and our status, right? So they just made it quick, easy, simple, instant gratification, all these things that we are already doing. So you can look at more or less like any successful tech product, and that's what they've done. So for example, like Uber, it's like, right, people have been have been going from point A to point B. We've been ordering cabs, et cetera, for a long time. It's very common behavior. They just made it much faster, simpler, easier in order to hail a ride, in order to order a cab. Instead of going out in the street, waving your hand in the air and just hoping one comes, or calling the cab company and then hopefully they send somebody to your house. Who knows if somebody's actually coming? Instead, what they've done is they made it much simpler, easier, and they've given you feedback the whole time so that you're sure that your problem's being solved. Like Amazon's the same way, right? On Amazon, they made it going to the store and buying pens or pads of paper, laundry detergent, whatever you want to buy. Like in the past, that would take, 20, 30, 45 minutes, an hour maybe to drive to the store, go find the item, check out, drive back home. On Amazon, you can just go into the app and within 2 seconds, you can get that, or not 2 seconds, but let's say within a minute, you can do the same thing. And
hey,
the
listen,
cool thing is
2 seconds if you've ordered it already. Buy again, click.
Exactly,
on the way.
yeah. So they've just made it just much faster, much easier for you to do what you were doing all along. And then they give you feedback the whole way. So it's like, hey, don't worry, your item's on the way. We shipped it. Oh, by the way, tomorrow it's going to get delivered. And then you can even see on the map, the Amazon delivery truck driver, you can see how many stops away they are, right? So they get rid of all uncertainty and give you this feedback all along the way. I do think that the great insight of the great tech companies they've been very good at just looking at what people are doing already and thinking, how do I just make this as simple and easy as possible? So that's like innovation number one. Innovation number two is, how do we reassure people along the way that their problem is being solved and give them feedback their problem is being solved? And so I think those are the two great insights from like technology. And I think that the medical world has a long way to go in that regard. So for example, right, like you go to the doctor, you get blood tests, you get a blood test done. You have no idea like what's happening with that result.
Yeah.
When am I going to get it back? Am I going to get it back tomorrow, in 2 weeks? And then sometimes you get your blood work done. You're sent a message that your results are ready, but then you have to review them, let's say with your physician or whatever it may be. And so now you have this uncertainty in your head. You don't know what's going to happen.
Unfortunately now, at least in New York State, or this might be a federal law, I don't know, where they get their results. So even before I see them, often the patients get them, and then they sometimes freak out because they don't know what to make of it. Like suddenly there's this abnormality and they don't know what to do. I don't get the results till a couple days later. And then there's this period of anxiety, or they're like, why haven't you called me yet? Well, because you get it before me. But I get your point. Like there are many ways. And for all the physician entrepreneurs out there, and there are a lot of them that listen to this show, I think that's fantastic advice. What are the things that patients are already doing that we can make even more patient friendly? Like
Yeah.
give them updates as to what's going on. Let them know that it's going to happen. And as you said, was it the three things: fast, simple, and easy?
Yeah, I'd say, well, fast, simple, easy. And then the next thing would be, can we just give people feedback or just keep them updated on what's going on
That
in a
it's happening.
very
Yeah.
transparent, efficient way? So for example, like it would be great, just with the blood test example, it'd be great if after I got, it doesn't have to be a blood test. It could be some diagnostic,
CAT scan, MRI, some type of
whatever.
imaging. Yeah.
It'd be great for me to see, or what if I got a notification that's like, hey, your MRI has been sent to the radiologist. They're going to check it out. And then you
Yeah.
get,
It's being read. Yeah.
it's
Something
being
like that.
read. The report's been finalized and sent to your
It's
physician.
been
They'll be in
draft. There's
touch
a draft version. It's been finalized. Here's the result. So you see it along the way. Each step is happening.
Even that, I think, could just increase patient satisfaction so much, make people less anxious. They know that something's being done. I know what to expect next. I know that you're going to be in touch with me. I know that you
It's
see
not
everything.
lost. It's not forgotten. Yeah, I've got some
Exactly.
expectations. And then you could say, like, the average time from here that patients get their results is 3 to 4 business days, right? Like,
Totally.
and that's easy because you have access to that because it's your data. You can figure that out if you're the lab or the radiology center or imaging center, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, or things like, for example, like making it simple and easy. So let's say that I used to use One Medical back when they don't have it in Nashville, but back when I was in California, I used One Medical, and I loved One Medical because they actually take these principles and they apply it to their practice. So make it simple and easy. So whenever I want to ask a question of my doctor, I could just log into their system and very quickly and easily send a message to the doctor, like almost like an iMessage almost.
Yeah.
And get a response back very quickly. Or if I have a prescription that I regularly get, I could actually go in there and request a refill just with a button. Can I get a refill of this prescription? Or, for things that were very common, for example, I'm sick, I need antibiotics. I know that you're not supposed to overprescribe antibiotics, but for something like that, where it's like a very common thing where just people are requesting antibiotics all the time, they had a place in the app where you could go to actually, for common things, request treatment. And you could even jump on a video call with a nurse practitioner very quickly. And so it's just really cool. So I thought that they did a very good job of just taking these tech principles and applying them to a medical practice. Using One Medical was the best medical experience I've ever had by far. I think that they do a really great job there. And I think that I know one of the founders of One Medical, they take these tech product design principles and they just applied it there. Of course, there's a lot more that they could have done as well. But I think that everybody can just learn from just applying these principles to their practices. Yeah.
I think that's great. That's a great lesson. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. So so 2 completely different directions that we ended up, like this last direction was more like, from the entrepreneurial side, but the rest of it was really how we can apply the principles of transformation, not so much habit development, but transformation and apply those to our patients. So I think it's really fantastic advice. And for those who want to take a deeper dive, you can find the book, Real Change, Moving Beyond Habits to Achieve Lasting Transformation. And you spell his last name Hreha. So Jason Hreha, thank you so much for your time and for your contributions to science.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.